Hello, my name is Laura Wacker, and I'm with Peaceworks. Our organization does public education and advocacy around multiple issues, and those include climate change. We do not endorse or oppose candidates for office, but we do inform our members, supporters, and the public at large as to where candidates stand on the issues that concern us. We have invited all candidates running for the Boone County Commission or the state legislature seats in Boone County who are in contested races to address questions we've shared with them in advance regarding climate change and climate action. We're limiting each interview to a maximum of 10 minutes. I'm here today with Kari Chesney, who is running for election to the Missouri General Assembly in the 50th district. We appreciate her taking time to respond and thus to make their views known. I will be asking the questions we've shared previously and only doing follow up if it seems that it would be helpful to clarify a response. Well, hello, Kari, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
We're going to start off with the first question, which is, do you accept the scientific consensus that climate change is real, human caused, and happening now? In your opinion, is human caused climate change a serious concern? If reelected, would you make addressing the climate crisis a top tier concern?
Well, thank you so much for letting me take a few minutes to respond to these questions. To answer the first one, yes, 100%. I believe 100% that man-made climate change is real, and that it is one of the most important issues that is going to plague the state and federal legislature for probably the next decade to figure out exactly how we're going to go about figuring out exactly how to combat climate change. As a scientist myself, I really cannot deny all of the evidence and research that has gone into climate change. And I feel like we already kind of have really good guidelines that have been recommended through science as to how we go about combating this. So the 50th district is relatively rural. It encompasses southern Boone County, northern Montauk County, and then slivers of Cole and Cooper County. So there is a lot of farmland out there. And one of the biggest issues that has come up in the last several years is the CAFO issue. So that's the concentrated animal feeding operations, factory farming, as I'll call it, issue. And so in 2019, our legislature basically went against all environmental recommendations and, you know, the mantra of local control, and prohibited local municipalities from enacting more stringent regulations on agriculture than the state level. What you might not know is that our state has some of the most lenient environmental regulations for agriculture in the country. And so we have been targeted by coastal and international corporations to come in and build these massive factory farms. And we know what happens when we get a bunch of these coming into the state. We can just look to the north, to Iowa, to see exactly what has happened. They have over 400,000 private wells that have been contaminated, directly correlated to the proximity to these factory farms. Property values plummet because the air and the water and the land quality just, you know, is devastated by these factory farming operations. So one of the first things that I'm going to focus on when I get into office is either redacting this stipulation that we cannot have local control, or making sure that our state regulations meet and exceed environmental standards.
Okay. What would you say is a climate change issue regarding factory farms?
So when we look at factory farming, there is a lot of production that goes into factory farming. You look at the average Missouri farm, they are not producing the massive amounts of CO2 that a lot of these factory farming operations do. So in terms of climate change, we're looking at the output. It's basically like it basically acts as an industry rather than a farming or agricultural operation. When we look at these standards, we're not talking about, your mom and pop family farm that's been around for generations. We're talking about, Smithfield, who's now owned by China, or Cargill, who's owned by Brazil, coming in and building these 1,000-head farming operations that are going to just destroy the environment that they're built in.
Okay. All right. Question number 2. What specific policy initiatives would you pursue to address climate change on the state level? So, factory farms might be one thing, but what would be something maybe a little different that you might address?
Sure. So as a state, we need to start looking at alternative fuels for the future. Obviously, I believe 100% in climate change, but for the small minority of people who don't, it doesn't matter what you believe. Eventually, one day, we're going to run out of fossil fuels. Like, that is just a fact. We run out. They are a finite resource. We have to do something to figure out alternative methods and sustainable methods in order to provide energy. And so Missouri is actually a pretty awful wind state, just in terms of the wind power that we are able to produce. We actually have to build really, really tall windmills, which is fine, and I am totally in favor of. But it does cost a little bit more to get up into as high as we need to in order to actually harness a lot of the wind power coming through Missouri. So we need to focus on other alternatives like solar. Solar would be an amazing opportunity for Missouri in order to get into alternative fuels. We can also, as a state, support and look into battery power. That is one of the biggest obstacles to some of these alternative methods for energy that we have run into is the battery capacity and the battery operation. How do we go about harnessing and storing all of this alternative energy to use later? And so as a state, there's a lot of opportunity there for us to invest in those different technologies as a state, which would produce green jobs, which is another thing that we need to strongly look into. Retraining programs for folks that work in coal and oil in order to get them into these alternative fields so that they continue on in the jobs that they were interested in. And so our state needs to invest in green tech, green jobs, and make sure that those jobs are not only well paid, but also unionized so that our workers actually have the opportunity to make good wages and have good benefits and be able to fight for the things that they deserve as working people.
All right. Next question. What do you see as the greatest obstacles to enacting and implementing the policies you see as needed? How would you address those obstacles?
I think one of the biggest obstacles to addressing any of this climate change policy is the rhetoric and the misinformation that's out there about it. There's a lot of folks who will say, oh, if we get rid of coal, if we get rid of oil, we're going to lose all these jobs. Well, if you actually look at the number of people who work in fossil fuels versus the number of people who work in alternative energy, I mean, that is just a completely lopsided ratio. There are, 10, 100 times more people that work in alternative energies than fossil fuels anymore. It's most of the states are, going away from fossil fuels, and those folks are actually, moving over to other alternative careers. And so the rhetoric that we're going to lose all of these, good paying jobs it's just not true. And that's one of the main things that I hear, at least from the federal level. It's all about jobs, jobs, jobs. Well, there are, an abundance of opportunities in alternative energy that we are just missing out on because we're not investing as we should as a state. You also hear, obviously there's people out there that think climate change isn't real and it's not an issue, but we just need to, it's a matter of the rhetoric, and it's a matter of the misinformation. We need to be out there as legislators advocating for these things and making sure that people understand the real, evidence and facts behind what's going on.
Okay. Question 4. Would you favor Missouri adopting a climate action and adaptation plan? If so, would you take the initiative to propose moving this forward?
Yes, I would 100% be on board with Missouri enacting a climate action and adaptation plan. I was on the Energy and Environment Commission for the city of Columbia and Boone County from 2017 till it got dissolved after the climate and adaptation plan got enacted in Columbia in 2019. So we were very strongly involved in the formation of the climate action and adaptation plan for the city. And I think that there were a lot of people who worked really hard on it, a lot of really smart individuals who put a lot of time into it, and the standards and guidelines that have been written into it are top notch. They match any other climate action and adaptation plan that's been developed anywhere else around the country. And so enacting that statewide would be a huge step in the right direction for our state.
Great. Lastly, are there any other thoughts you have regarding addressing climate change you'd like to share with the voters?
Yeah, I honestly, so as a younger individual, I just turned 32, running for office. My fiance, soon to be husband, and I are going to be starting a family very, very soon. And climate change is a huge factor, honestly, in our future plans for our family and for our life. And I hear that a lot from young people who are either, trying to figure out whether they're going to start a family, or figuring out, the future, what the future is going to look like for them if they're in undergrad or high school even. And it is the probably climate change and gun reform are the two top issues on the minds of younger voters. And so I would say that people interested in climate change and legislators that are interested in addressing climate change need to involve the youth vote and younger voters, and even high school kids that are not yet able to vote. Make sure that they are invested and involved in the political process, and that you are including their ideas and their knowledge and their desires into the policies that you are going to be forming, because all of this climate change policy is going to directly impact those people. There's a lot of folks in the legislature right now who probably will never live to see the effects of climate change. But what we do now is going to directly impact generations down the line, our children. And so we need to be involving them in these talks.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us here today and informing our members and the public at large your ideas on combating climate change and your goals for getting into the legislature and what you might do to help us. So thank you very much, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.